this is Cinematic Fanatics. I'm Carolyn Hernandez.
I'm Greg Capelbo.
Okay, and today we'll be reviewing the movie Wonder Woman. Directed by Patty Jenkins, screenplay by Alan Heinberg. The story was by Zack Snyder and Jason Fuchs. It's an action, adventure, and fantasy movie. A quick summary, by the way, there are spoilers. Amazon princess goes on a voyage to save humanity from destroying itself under the influence of Ares, or the god of war. The leads are Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, or Diana Prince, and Chris Pine as Steve Trevor.
Our story takes place at the beginning on this island called Paradise Island, and then slowly transitions to London during World War I. And so Paradise Island is a very beautiful place. It's got a nice little ocean over there, nice cliffs, beautiful green grass.
Vibrant colors.
Yes, vibrant, a lot of vibrant colors, but we don't get to see any of it. And it kind of angers me because it's so beautiful, but we only see these little glimpses of this wonderful scenery, and we never get to see the more, and it just leaves me with wanting.
I agree, but I also have to give credit to the overall, like the scenery itself, like the parts that you did see in the scenes where you just see her childhood. It's just a brief introductory to her as a child and growing up, wanting to learn how to fight. It is very pleasant, and there's a lot of details and a lot of work that went into it. This includes the wardrobe. They tried to be as accurate as possible, and they tried their best to make the scene look as though you're in another universe where everything is perfect and beautiful. But I do agree with you, there should have been more time for enjoying these details.
Yes, I agree. And it doesn't even go into the whole culture of the island either, which I felt I really wanted to know more about because it's very interesting because they're all isolated from everyone, yet I don't know anything about them. Their politics, their way of life. I know they're a militaristic society, but that's it.
I agree with you. Now we can transition to the scenery and the contrast when the movie moves to London and the war, which I'm assuming it takes place in World War I, given the very many similarities. So I think it's a brilliant contrast, though, because Paradise Island is supposed to almost be symbolic of a perfect world, what people can accomplish and do and live in harmony when they're not engaging in sins and in conflict, which is what the god of war represents and his havoc wreaking on the rest of the world, which is really dark and glum, and I really enjoyed that contrast. I think it did justice to what I believe was the symbolism of it.
I would definitely agree with that, yeah. It was a nice stark contrast in typical World War I fashion. Everything was all grim and dark, but it worked well, so
yeah,
I'm accepting it.
Yeah. And I appreciated the details of World War I, such as the trench warfare and the use of like weapons such as chemical bombs that were very popular at that time period. Now, I did have one small issue with camera work, and that was when there was combat happening. It was very shaky, like the camera moved with the combatant, and that made it very difficult to see what was going on. And honestly disappointed because it made it also very difficult to appreciate the combat itself, like to see what's happening and be like, wow, that's really cool. I couldn't really see what was happening at all.
And on that same topic of fights, one thing the director did a lot was use a lot of slow motion, which it just takes you away from the experience. First off, they overused it way too much, but even from the very first scenes they used it, which a bunch of Amazons were training all in slow-mo, it just makes it feel so much less real, you know? It's more cinematic, but in a bad way. It takes you out of the whole movie experience, and it's cliche, and it annoys me.
I agree. I feel like there was a lot of corners cut as though like they wanted to make more time in small things when they could have added more. Like they could have added more action instead of slowing down the scenes and drawing on the time. On that note of cutting corners, I feel the script itself was a bit too simple. It did take some comedic approaches, but it didn't really give the characters enough to work on, to develop their characters, to show some more emotion, to show more of their drives and what's going on inside their heads.
I would agree with that. It was very surface level rather than deep meaning to it, I felt.
Yeah, I wanted more uniqueness And I also was disappointed in the script and the dialogue of the main character Wonder Woman, because it's mentioned very often that she's a very educated woman who reads many books, and she learns from these books, and she's never really experienced our world, so she wouldn't really understand how to speak as you and I speak. I expected more of like elegant, vocabulary, words that we wouldn't use in everyday language. I just wanted more of like that insight on the characters, but there wasn't really any to be found when it came to the script.
And on that same topic of language, somehow Wonder Woman knows hundreds of languages, yet it's made clear that their Amazons have all been isolated from society for thousands of years, yet somehow they've learned all these languages and have all these books. It's just not made very clear how. I don't even think it explained it in the exposition, which there is a lot of. They use a lot of exposition, and they just never, it's not a creative way of showing your story and explaining the backstory of them.
Yeah, I agree. It's another one of those examples of cutting corners, trying to get the story along. There's way too much exposition, and they're not showing us enough. They're telling us what's happening, and I would have enjoyed more of a background rather than like having Steve Trevor explain what's happening or having other characters explain the history of the Amazons. And the visuals were nice, but the dialogue that went along with the visuals was unnecessary. We could have just enjoyed it. They could have put more attention to the details so that we could have clearly understood what we were seeing and translated it the way that they wanted us to, instead of having it all be explained word for word. Given all the character things that I said, breaking it down, like, I didn't enjoy the acting of Gal Gadot for a lot of reasons. I felt that she very much lacked emotion. One of the examples that first stuck out to me was when her beloved Aunt Antiope, I believe her name was, passed away in front of her and died protecting her. Also, Wonder Woman had never experienced death previously to that. And her response to it was just like clearly scripted, and she just said no, no, but it was in a way that was unbelievable and almost cringy to me. Like, it just was so fake and disappointing that I didn't really want to see the rest of the scene, honestly. And another thing is when she leaves home, there's no conflict in her mind. It seems like she's not disappointed or sad. She seems too one-dimensional in the aspect that she's like, oh, I'm a hero and I'm noble on the inside and out, so there's nothing more to me. It was very disappointing. I wanted to see more of the human aspects of her character.
I would definitely agree. They focused more on the warrior part, and Gal Gadot definitely didn't act that human element to her. Because Wonder Woman, she's still a person.
Yes.
She still has emotions. She's not some god, although
she is a god, but she's lived as a human for most of her life, and she's experienced things as we would on a little more perfect level. But that even makes the death of her aunt even more devastating, because she's lived in this perfect little bubble, and then suddenly her aunt dies before her eyes protecting her. It's just something that should have been way more dramatic, and the acting just wasn't there for her. I do, however, liked the acting of Chris Pine as Steve Trevor. I thought it was, there were some moments, however, that he fell short on, like, just personal matters. But for the most part, I felt on personal matters, he did a good job at being dramatic and showing emotion. And there were a lot of moments where he didn't even need dialogue to show what he was thinking, and I really appreciated that. I thought that was amazing.
Yes, I would agree. He definitely rose above the other actors in that aspect, and he was actually enjoyable. I enjoyed watching him.
As for the rest of the cast, I felt that the acting was decent. It wasn't bad. It wasn't poor. It was pretty good. I enjoyed it. And the only problem I had was the fact that, again, the dialogue, the script itself, didn't give them enough to go off of, didn't give them enough to actually like pursue their characters, to show everyone what they are. Instead, it was just very simple. It's like they didn't really put much effort in trying to develop characters. It was all up to the actors, and that's challenging.
I would agree. There was a lot of one-dimensional characters, like this one character, Dr. Poison. She was developing all these poisons and stuff, and she clearly had a backstory to her because her face was burned and she wore this mask. It's never really explained, and she's just the villain, the sidekick's villain, and that's all.
And it's also often showed, speaking of her, I think that's a brilliant character to show an example of that. She's also clearly very heartbroken on the inside. There's a scene where she's speaking to Steve Trevor and she's saying things like she's feeling emotion for him so easily. It's as though she's lonely, but we don't really get more of that. She doesn't actually speak that often in that script, in that part of the movie either,
yes.
which leaves us wondering, what's your backstory? What's there to know about you that we're missing, clearly? And again, that could have been explained, but if they were to explain it, it probably would have been with exposition of some sorts, instead of actually being more creative, as we would hope. Anything else to add?
No, I think we're good. Yes.
I found it as an overall good movie. I enjoyed it very much. The only things that I have to complain about was the lead's acting, honestly, and the little effort that went into the actual, like the skeleton of the movie, the structure of it. Everything else was brilliant. The scenery was nice. Everything was well done on the visuals. It was basically just the script that ruined it and took away from it.
I would agree. I definitely recommend this for fans of Wonder Woman or people just looking for a nice lighthearted movie to watch on the weekend with their friends.
And this has been our review for Wonder Woman. I'm Carolyn.
I'm Greg Capalbo.
And this has been Cinematic Fanatics.